Hello and welcome to Mike's Garage. If you've already subscribed to our YouTube channel, thank you. If you haven't yet, please do. And when you do, be sure and tap on the little notification bell so you'll be notified every time we put up a new video. Also, I'd like to say thank you for all the likes. By all means, please press the like button. Okay. Now, I've been commented to, I don't know how many times now, for this same thing, and I guess I haven't shown it, so I thought I would. Over and over again, I've heard from the guys with shovel heads, where do all those oil lines go? And I usually reply, it's in the service manual, and it shows you. The only problem is I looked in the service manual here recently, and I remember now trying to sort it all out a long time ago. And their pictures and their explanation on the shovel head specifically is not really easy to follow. They did a much better job on the evolutions where they actually put a nice diagram as to where the oil lines go in the service manual. Writing a good service manual is almost an art. And some of the stuff they do is wonderful, some is not. Some of it's a little easier to follow than others. So I asked Mike if we could get together and do this one. And honestly, I'm not going to take my motorcycle apart to show how the oil lines go. So please try to follow along with me, and I'll try to show it to the best of my ability here. Well, let's get started. When we first started doing videos, we made up this pointer. May seem a little corny, but it's a whole lot smaller than my hands, so hopefully you can see in there. So here we are at the right side of the motorcycle, and here is the oil pump. And, of course, all the oil lines. I try to do them as neatly as possible. Makes them easy to follow for me. So let's start at the beginning here, the feed line, right there. In other words, the most outward fitting on the top of the oil pump. Now that's if you're using a Harley Davidson oil pump. Sometimes S&S gives you the option of putting the feed line down here lower. If so, please look at the instructions with the S&S that came with your S&S oil pump. If not, you can look them up in the S&S catalog online. But this is the feed line. Now, the feed line comes out of the bottom of the oil tank. In other words, it's depending on the gravity, the weight of the oil pushing down to feed to the oil pump. Now, the easiest way to attach that line is with the battery and battery box off, and to get in there and attach that line to the oil tank. And that line comes from under the oil tank and then comes right along through here and right on down to the oil pump. Now there's a little bracket in there that attaches to the seat post of the frame. I don't know if you can see the pointer in there or not. I've got a chrome bolt in there, so it might show up a little better. I can't help myself. When I'm putting stuff together, I like to use chrome nuts and bolts. So there's the factory bracket that holds those lines back and out of the way of the exhaust pipe. As you can see my hand in here, there's that much room between the pipe and the oil lines. That's real important to make sure they aren't touching that pipe. Okay, so that's the feed line from the bottom of the oil tank to the outermost fitting on the top of the pump. Now the next fitting is the one inside of that one. You get this line out of the way so you can see it. There is the fitting. There is the fitting. That's the return line. That line goes from the fitting all the way up again behind that bracket and up to the top of the oil tank where it goes in around the oil cap. Now some of the later shovel heads don't have this kind of cap, and there's two fittings on top of the tank. One is the return, and this is that return. Now, on this particular bike, I run an oil cooler. So the cooler runs in series with the return line. In other words, the oil comes out of the pump, and you can see in here, there's a big loop. And that loop goes under the motor, or next to the motor here, and right on back up and to the oil cooler. And then the other line comes out of the oil cooler, right back next to the motor again, and comes right back up and returns to this same place. Again, you're just putting it in line with the return. So it returns to the cooler, from the cooler back to the tank. There's your return. Okay, now there's a third line here. This one is the breather line from the motor. So this one comes out of the motor and comes right through here, again, bunched in with the same group of oil lines, and right back up and into the oil tank. Now, if you look closely, you can see right here there's a T in that line. This is for the stock setup, which I use. If you're using a belt drive or something like that, you're not going to be doing it. But if you're running the stock primary oiling system, this breather hose has to go out of that T and right to the center of the inner primary. It's a 3/8 hose. All of these are 3/8 of an inch hose. Okay, that's the breather line for that. Now this skinny little line is the one that goes over. It goes behind the seat post, and you hook it right to the back of the inner primary where it drips oil onto the primary chain. I don't know if we can see that in there or not. Can you see that, Mike? I kind of hope so. Let's see, is that it? Yes, that's it. Right there. Okay. Now at the back of the primary, back of the inner primary, down here in the corner somewhere, I think I'm there, down there, there's another fitting, and that gets a 3/8 hose, and that's the return line from the inner primary. Now that comes all the way back over to here, back over to the motor again, and we'll see if we can see where that one goes in right there. And that's next to the oil pump coming out of the crankcase. Actually going into the crankcase. It's returning from the inner primary to the crankcase. And that's how that chain oiler works. I know a lot of people hate those. I find they work just fine, and I use them. Okay, the only other hose here now is one further in there coming off the crankcase, which is your crankcase breather breathing to the atmosphere. And I don't think we can see that one, but it's in there. And here's that hose exiting the engine. Okay, now that explains all of the oil lines. What I'd like to do now, I'm sure people are going to ask about these clamps. A lot of people like screw clamps, and I think they're fine. Nothing in the world wrong with them. These clamps are similar to what the factory used. These are actually, I think, a little better. And let's see, I have one out here somewhere. Let's see. There it is now. Okay. Let's get a piece of hose, because a lot of people think it's a real nightmare to do these hoses. With the proper tools, there's nothing to it. First off, I'm going to make this end nice and square. And there it is, a perfectly square line, square end. Okay, now, let's take a nice new fitting here. And I'm going to put this clamp on it. And I'm going to put that fitting in there. Let's wet it a little bit. There it is all the way on. And there is a crimper you can buy from probably any tool truck has it. This particular one was made by KD. I'm used to it holding still because it's on the bike. I want to get it fairly close to the end. And I'm going to crimp it. And there it is. Now screw clamps to me, they take longer and I don't think they're quite as neat. I order stainless clamps online. Give you an idea here. I like them because they give even pressure all the way around. You see there's like an extra piece in there. So it gets a full diameter clamp on it. Full circumference clamp on it. And that's the way I like to do it. I've had people ask me, they say, well, what if you have trouble out on the road? What are you going to do? Well, you take your cutters out of your tool bag and you cut that clamp and you put a screw clamp on it till you get home and put your pretty crimp clamp on it again. Again, these are stainless steel, not to be advertising for anyone, but I believe I ordered them online from McMaster Car. Be sure you have your measurements when you go to order them. Another thing about this crimper that really works well, this particular pair belonged to a buddy of mine, and he ground the shoulders down on it. And what happens is it's easier to get in there when you're working on a bike without having to fight around those shoulders. But you can see here how that works. Show how I can do it and not do it. There we go. And that's how they work. So that's pretty much how the oil lines go on a shovel head. And for anyone that has that question, I hope I answered those questions because they come up real often. So if you're putting one together, the idea is to put them together in the right order when you're building the bike. When you do the inner primary, I find the easiest way is to feed the hose from this side over to the inner primary, get them all hooked up on the inner primary and strung through the bike. Then when you put that inner primary on, all you have to do is come over to the other side and cut them to length as you install them. Makes it a whole lot easier. So I hope that helps somebody and I hope it answers the questions. Like I said, I really didn't want to take this one apart to show it. I just took the air cleaner off so we could get in there. That's as far as I'm going with it. It's all together and ready to go for a ride. So, till next time, I'll see you out on the road.